building the United States advanced electric grid is a multi-trillion-dollar business opportunity over the next 10 years. It is opportunities for construction companies, computer companies, equipment companies, solar companies, and wind turbine companies, and it is especially an opportunity for nuclear energy plants and equipment. I am Michael Killen, and I'm going to discuss these opportunities with an associate of mine, one of the leading thinkers in the energy market, Ripu Malhotra. And Ripu, have I pronounced your last name properly?
Yes, you have.
Okay, Ripu. Could we start by looking at the various elements of the electric grid? And
Sure.
which one of the three would you like to start out with?
Well, I guess you are referring to the three major elements that we talk about, which is the generation, the transmission and distribution, and then the consumption of electricity.
Yes, that's it.
That's it. So let's take a look at where we stand today. Based on the information that I have from the United States Energy Information Agency, it's a part of the Department of Energy, I can get a status of what 2020 had. Now, the US gets its electricity from many sources, still gets from coal, gas, hydroelectric, nuclear, wind, solar, you name it. Plenty of sources. There are about 19,000 generators, and they all have a total capacity added on to it's about 1.2 terawatts. In a year, since they don't run all at the same time, all the time, the generation is about 4,000 terawatt hours only. So that means about 30% of the time is when you really are operating, or a little more than that.
I have a question. When you say
Yes.
4 terawatt hour, is that per hour?
No, 4,000 terawatt hours. That's the total for the
Okay.
annual. The wattage is the 1.2 terawatts. So if
Okay.
you run the 1.2 terawatts completely all the time, for 1 hour, it'll be 1.2 terawatt hours.
Okay.
But in a year of about 9,000, close to 9,000 hours, they don't produce 10,000 terawatt hours. They produce about 4,000 terawatt hours. So more than 30, so close to 40% capacity. So that's how it works. So at any given time, any given moment, if you look at the electricity that's flowing through the wires here in the United States, it'll be on the order of, could be half a terawatt, could be a terawatt, could be 2/10 of a terawatt. It varies depending on how much it's being used. It has to be balanced with what the demand is. At the same time, there's not much of electricity that is being stored. Some of it does get wasted along the transmission, but that's a small amount, and we are not going to dwell on that. But then these generators, once they have generated the electricity, that has to be sent out to the consumers. And this is done by through a variety of things, like high voltage tension lines, or the lower voltage distribution lines. We have in the United States 55,000 substations that operate with this. They're distributed throughout the country, but because you have to serve all populations, no matter how remotely they are located. We had made that commitment back in the 30s, and even later. I think it was under Johnson's administration that it really began to be expanded into all the rural areas. So we have 6.3 million miles of distributions. You were
That's
saying
a lot.
something, Michael. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes, could we go back for a moment? You gave a number for the different energy producing components,
Yeah.
and it was a very large number. Would you tell us the categories of those energy sources?
Sure. So we have coal, gas, hydroelectric. So as I said, a total of about 19,000 generators. And combined, they produce about 4,000 terawatt hours. I can break down that distribution and look at how much is being produced by coal, how much is produced by natural gas and nuclear and things like that. So actually, there is a graphic that I have made about it. And if we can have the graphic, I think it's the slide that shows. Can you put that up, please?
It's up. At least I can
Yeah,
see it.
good. So you can see here the 2020 data is on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is, again, the projection for 2050 by the U.S. Department of Energy's Energy Information Agency. Energy Information Administration, I think that's the correct name.
May I
Yeah.
just
Yes, please.
interrupt? Coal is still going to be an important energy source from this slide.
Yes. In this projection, now there are many projections. These are this is not, you're absolutely right. This projection doesn't show coal or natural gas disappearing. So this is not the pathway that will lead us to zero carbons by 2050. This is not that scenario. This is the scenario that the US DOE kind of thinks is the most likely one. This is where we are headed. If we are going to be a little more aspirational and I want to cut that down, we will have to increase the amount of solar and the amount of nuclear and wind substantially and cut the coal and natural gas down. You see, even natural gas is a very large portion in the 2050 scenario as it stands. And these both have to be reduced to nothing.
Are you convinced the United States and also the rest of the world will significantly cut the use of coal and natural gas? Did you hear me?
I heard you. It's hard to say. I know we are all really looking forward to doing that. I don't want to minimize how difficult it's going to be and how large the opportunity is. It is enormous. And I could have shown you the graph that the people. It's easy to draw lines with the things disappearing to zero, and there are many charts you will find on the web, including on the DOE's website, which will show that that's the. And if you look at the Green New Deal or some of the other Build Back Better plans, the projections are much more aggressive than what is being shown on this one. But what is needed is substantially more than what this projection shows. And we were talking about the elements. We digressed here. Let's get back to that main thing. So we have those, as I said, we have the thousands of miles of high tension wires, which is for the lower long distances, and then the distribution lines, which are the low tension ones. And they have, now why do I have to talk about this? If you just want to energy production is all that's needed, why am I talking about so much transmission and distribution also?
Well,
because you will need, if you are going to be producing so much more solar and all that, you need a new capacity the wires to take that. And today,
Yes.
if you look at it, there are many places in the United States, and right near where you're living, there was a case study, there was an article in the newspaper just within the last week. Uh, a couple living not far from you, Michael,
Yes.
spent almost $30,000 in installing a solar panel on their rooftop and just cannot get it to work because the local distribution, the transformers and all, they're going to blow up if they connect their system to that. Because
Interesting.
wires are now there have to be smarts in these wires. They have to be able to transmit it in both directions, and some intelligence has to be there to see, oh, where do I need it and where is the call coming from, and be able to go both ways. Previously, this distribution was one-way traffic. They produce it, you send it, and then you distribute it to all the other places.
So everyone, we have millions of people putting solar panels up, and we need
Yeah.
more intelligence in the system to balance the
The need.
demand
Yeah.
and the creation, and to be
Yeah.
able to switch,
Yeah.
which will require a lot of computers, I would imagine.
Yes, it would require computers also, and smart devices. It doesn't have to be just full-blown computers. It could be smart devices. And then the reason I'm also saying that the total energy, this was today's 4,000 terawatt hours. If I look at what they were projecting in this slide, you saw that it was barely about it was 47. It was only a 37% increase. It was not a very large increase, 5,000 some terawatt hours. That's not going to suffice, because if I look at what will be needed, let's look at the next slide, which talks about how it is being used. So we have got three main buckets of consumers: industrial, residential, and commercial. Right now, we don't have any significant amount transportation. There are a few cars, electric cars, but and some electric trains, but the total amount of energy is so small, it's thinner than the smallest line that I can draw on this graph.
Right.
But by 2050, according to this scenario, there will be a substantial, maybe about 100 some terawatt hours. But that's not enough. I think we need about 6 times that. And if I look at the residential is increasing, yes, but that's just because we try to electrify everything. We want to heat the homes with not with natural gas, or the cooking not with natural gas, but with electricity. And if we
Yes.
want to electrify the homes and do all our heating in the commercial sector, also with this, that's the buildings, if you're talking about just the buildings. But there's a huge part in the industry where also a lot of process heat is needed. And that is not being counted at the moment. We have to include the electricity for that. And then biggest one is the transportation sector. There is a lot of cars. We are barely at a few million cars now. The US has got 200 million, 300 million cars. And if you want to supply that so many cars, and each car for a year uses 2.5 megawatt hours or roughly of electricity, you multiply it up, add it up, it gets to almost another 1,000 terawatt hours, or approaching that. It's on that order. This will not be a thin bar, but it'll be a big fat chunk on top of that. So I see that the total terawatt hours needed by 2050 to increase to about 8,000, which means I'm basically doubling my energies. So if I have 1.2 terawatts of capacity today, I need to get to about 2 terawatt capacity. To install a capacity of every watt, it takes several dollars. several dollars per watt is a rough number you can think of. Some are about $1, some require $3, some requires $5, depending on where you are. But it's a few dollars per terawatt. So if I have 1.2 terawatts to install, and I have only, and I've got at that rate, so here is the $1 trillion opportunity. Several trillions of dollars. That's where it comes from. If you look at the miles that I was talking about, it depending on some high tension wires, they're hundreds of $1,000s per mile.
Yes.
And then you have, so that's how you adds up to millions of dollars. And it does not only for the generators, but also for installing the wire, laying the wire down, and construction of all kinds. Yes.
On that multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, what's your guess on the number of jobs will be created by building the advanced electric grid over the next 10 years? Millions?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Millions. It'll be in the millions. Yes.
Okay.
The economists generally, we have a rule of thumb. They use about $60,000 per job year.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
That's so you can.
All right.
But yes, these add up to millions of jobs.
Can we go back to your slide for a moment?
Sure.
This is a United States Department of Energy slide, and am I correct? You don't agree with everything we see here.
Let me be clear. This is a scenario of the United States Energy. I'm not saying that this is one of their guesses. This is what they are thinking is where we are going today with the policies that we have in place. It does not reflect the changing policies that may happen, and we haven't seen those. Who knows what the policy changes might be? But based on the current policy, this is the best guess.
All right. I'd like to ask. I can understand electrifying the residential area. I see it in Menlo Park, Atherton, Palo Alto. It's all happening, and that would mean more energy.
Electricity.
Yes.
You are getting energy either by gas, or now you'll be getting it by electricity. So your wires to the home have to be of the capacity to be able to handle that extra load.
Okay. And on the industrial sector, are we also electrifying the businesses, the manufacturers?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. We need a lot of technologies to be developed. Iron and steel is a big one. Currently, the iron ore is smelted. When you pull out the ore, these are often oxides. We throw it with coke or coal, basically, and that's carbon. That's carbon-based. Or we do the reductions using natural gas. If we produce hydrogen, we use a lot in petroleum refining. That hydrogen comes from natural gas. And if we want to convert that source of hydrogen from coal or natural gas to electricity, then I need a lot more electricity also for it. And that hasn't been accounted for.
Okay, can I ask this question? If you go down the street to the people walking on the street and you ask them about the future use of energy, many will say solar. We're going to put solar everywhere. And some will say wind. And I think they forget, many of them, that we require gigantic battery capacity, because when the sun sets, the energy from the sun stops. And when the wind turbines, the wind stops, they go dead. And that pretty much leaves us to nuclear energy. And am I correct?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because I think you're onto something here, Michael. It's a very important part. So the way you deal with the intermittency is you overbuild. Let's say if I'm going to be producing only a third of the time, then let me build 3 times what I can, so that in the same hour I produce the 3 units that I'm going to be using, but then I have to store those 2 units at least for the 16 hours. So we have to add the building. So instead of 1.2 terawatts, I may have to add the capacity, maybe even more than that, because we're not going to be using it all the time. So it may be even higher. But the storage is one aspect, and the other is that these solar and wind require a lot of concrete and steel and glass and aluminum and stuff, a lot of materials. If I look at the multiplier for the globe, I see that it is on the same order as the current production of iron and steel, which means the steel industry as a whole has to double up. Concrete industry as a whole has to double up. And these things, as they double up, they require a ton of lots of carbon at the moment. So I have to have this not only increase the capacity, but also develop new technologies to use electricity or hydrogen or something. Hydrogen, again, is not a primary source. It has to be produced somehow. And if I produce it cleanly, it has to be done with either nuclear. That's where the nuclear comes in. It has the smallest environmental footprint. And I on your show, we have talked about it previously. I am very hopeful that people are coming around to the fact that nuclear is something we cannot ignore. We should really be embracing nuclear power. It really can be environmentally extremely beneficial, and we won't have to juggle the electricity kind of through storage and all that as much, or build all these. We can. And now they take time. Nuclear plants take time. Smaller ones, yes, they still take time. And so in the meantime, as they are being built, we need some places where we can install wind and solar, and that's okay. I don't object to that. But don't ignore that over the long range, over the long haul that I'm talking about, between now and the end of this century, really, we will need a lot more nuclear.
Yeah, so solar and wind are, in a way, lightweights.
They're lightweights and they're environmentally damaging. We're not seeing that right now, but we will.
And the nuclear is the heavyweight.
Yeah.
And would it be safe to speculate that if we are going to stop climate change, we're not going to do it with solar and wind and burning so much carbon as a result of producing those two solutions, that maybe we're only going to stop it with nuclear?
I agree with that statement.
Oh,
I think it's going to be very difficult to do it with just those, because by the time you account for the other damage, the other materials losses, and you can see that today also. They build the solar farms in the country, or wind farms. The reports will show you, I need only 1% of the U.S. land, or a very tiny fraction of the U.S. land. Yes, it's a tiny fraction, but whose land? Where are you putting it? You need to put it near the source of where it's going to be consumed also. Or you need to build huge transmissions, and you got to get the materials for those.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, Ripu. What do you think of President Biden's energy initiatives? Well,
Well,
come
they were
on,
very
Ripu.
bold, they were very aggressive, and they were needed. They were not aggressive enough, but they were needed. Unfortunately, even, I mean, within his own party, he hasn't been able to sell it or whatever. You know, there's still objections from the different factions, and people haven't come around to a way that they can produce it. And the $1 trillion that we are talking about is not something that has to come from the government necessarily. Government only has to put in the seed money for it. The businesses are the ones where you will have a lot more. I mean, I'd say at least 10 times more the outlay than what the government has to do.
Okay. I think we have a couple of minutes left, and I think you, as usual, have done a wonderful job. And I think my only question is, let's see, of the initiatives of President Biden, which one do you think has the greatest impact? The electric grid?
Oh, yes, I think electrification of transportation and the support for electrification of the society as a whole is very important if we want to combat. But then we also need to produce electricity cleanly. So both are needed. You know, you got to electrify transportation, residential, commercials, industry, but also produce the electricity cleanly. And that could be done. And if they have to use carbon capture at the same time, well, for some cases, that may be the only option.
Yeah. Briefly, the status of carbon capture. Oh, and or drawing down from the atmosphere the carbon.
Right, right. That's carbon capture. Carbon capture, you can do it either draw down from the atmosphere directly, CO2, capture the CO2, and then bury it in saline aquifers, or as you are producing the electricity, you capture it at the same time. So power generation, you can use natural gas, but then don't have the CO2 come out of the stack, but capture it, but then bury it.
All right.
Bury it safely.
I am Michael Killen. My guest has been one of the more important energy consultants on the planet, Ripu Malhotra. And Ripu, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.